All right, hard yarners. This week's episode, before I get to our guest, we don't have Delby. So no Delby, it's just me and the wonderful Corey White.
Johnny Deppstein back in the booth, speaking the truth.
It was a fucking awesome episode as always. Got a little bit vulnerable at the end there.
Yeah, we did, speaking our truth.
Yeah, speaking our truth.
But self-reflecting.
But before we get into what we talked about in this episode is brought to you by alltradescover.com.au. They run insurance for all sorts of trades. I'm not going to give specific examples because, he can get in trouble for that if we give an example. Get around it. He'll help you out, I guess, potentially if you're going to maybe get your tools stolen on site or whatever, some stuff like that. They're going to insure you. Big companies, small companies, whatever you want, any sort of building business, alltradescover.com.au has you covered. This episode's also brought to you by Kahuna Golf. Are you into golf at all?
I don't mind playing a back nine now.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, Kahuna Golf. I don't know if you've seen any of the clips that we've put up, but the attire is very floral. It's the Hawaiian sort of vibe, but it feels fucking awesome. I mentioned this the other day. I played golf the other day. It was fucking hot and it was real breathable and stuff. So really good, looks good. Delby even says he feels like a golf player, even though he can't play for shit. But it's bloody awesome. We've actually got a discount code for Hard Yarns listeners. It is Hard Yarns 15. So if you go on there and you want to get any of your attire for golf, hats, shorts, shirts, they've even got rags for your clubs, not time activities. You can get involved. So 15% off, Hard Yarns 15. And this episode is also brought to you by Branchy Brewing Co. The beer that's actually good. You might challenge that.
No comment.
But they are the beer that's actually good. I do like that lager. I'm sober at the moment, but if I was going to be my arm twisted, it would be for a raunchy. But today we were joined, as I said, by the lovely Street Jesus, Corey White. What did we talk about today, mate? It was a pretty good episode.
Oh, mate, we talked about forgiveness, religion. We had a little bit of a rant about the jab fallout.
Oh, yeah, that was a big...
predictions, self-reflection, self-improvement, stoicism, Andrew Tate. What didn't we talk about, mate?
Fuck, it was a pretty good one, actually.
It was expansive, chat.
It's a really good one. And you weren't interrupted with puns every 2 minutes.
No, Greta Thunberg's in Bali.
Yes, Delby's in Bali, but he'll be back next week. I think next week we're actually joined by the other colour, Corey Green. But until then, thank you very much. Fucking awesome episode. And let's get home.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Delby.
And Cameron Branch.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
I always felt like it was you needed him, and I do, because it's fun. Because he makes, do you know what he does? He makes fun, serious topics palatable.
Sometimes he's like a diffuser.
Yeah, 100%. But I did one episode by myself with Dave Hughes, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think it was just you get to say what you want a bit more often, and maybe it's ego serving, but regardless, how you going, man? Good to have you on. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, where has the last 12 months gone?
Mate, it's I remember leading into December and just going, what the fuck? Like, it's nearly Christmas.
Yeah.
That was hectic, but it was such a big year, and I think, election year, I dare say there's going to be a bit more going on.
Well, we're in for a big one, 2024. There's all sorts of things going on.
There is a bit going on. But most importantly, before we get into what's going on around the world, the Fringe is coming up. You've got some shows
going,
and It's you've been chucking a bit up about Fringe, actually. I notice.
Yeah, well, they took issue with my content. They accused me of
I mentioned
racism.
I mentioned on the pod. I went through some of the things that you sent me, and I was like, "Fuck, man, it's pretty hectic."
It was so funny because they sent me this email saying you have to remove this, this, and this, because what do they say? We support free speech, but and then they said you're going to have to resubmit some copy. So I sent this big long open email in response.
Yeah.
And I said we'll replace that quote with we support free speech, but as well. And then I was waiting for a response because it was a big email I sent.
Yeah.
And they just said, okay, thanks, Corey. It's like, they them came, they them saw, they them capitulated. Right? And it gets better, right?
Oh,
so
fuck.
after that's gone, published that on my Substack, which you should all subscribe to, by the way. A member of the general public gets in contact with me and says, hey, next time the Fringe give you any shit, show them this photo.
Yeah.
And would you believe it was a photo of one of the board members who's a non-binary drag queen doing drag in blackface.
Oh, fucking hell.
Finally, you came along.
Oh, my
So
God.
I didn't know what to do with it. At first I was like, oh, should I blackmail them? You know, I was like, give me some free advertising.
Well, I'm
perhaps even a Fringe award. But I was like, well, that's illegal, and I'm sure the legal practice board would take a very dim view of it. So I thought, instead of blackmail, what about a white mail them? Well, what's white mail, Corey? Well, white mail differs from blackmail in the sense that it's legal and not racist. So I'm yet to hear about my free advertising, Fringe. Be a shame if that photo was doing the rounds again.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing that they want. Like, so is that a requirement with the free advertising and help? That's part of the?
No, you pay for it.
You pay for it,
and you know the ones that they do promote for free is acrobats and jugglers and anodyne comedians who talk about themselves all the time. My gender, race, and sexuality is the most interesting thing about me.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing now where being truthful, just basically saying what everyone else is thinking. It's in a comical way. It's working, and you see that with the popularity of like Ricky and Dave Chappelle. But I wasn't a fan of their. I didn't mind Dave Chappelle's one. Have you seen them yet?
I haven't. Excuse me. I haven't seen either.
So I've seen Ricky's and first felt very like I'm saying this specifically to get a reaction.
Yeah, and you know what? Like it's easy to trigger the lefties. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not even a sport anymore. It's just all you have to say is women want to get pregnant. Like, they're outraged. You know.
But yes, I've seen that, and then granted, this was prior to me starting my sobriety. I watched Dave Chappelle's on Mushies, and I thought it was fucking hilarious. So I'm gonna have to rewatch it.
Funny on
I'm gonna have
Mushies,
to
bro.
rewatch it sober. I've heard a couple of people say they liked it, and a couple of people say no, it was not his best. But if not his best, it's still fucking better than 90% of what's out there. It's still
Well, what have the woke brigade got?
Yeah.
Fuck all. But
Yeah.
do you know what annoyed me, right? Is it's like they're both socio-political comedians who talk about social issues, and when it comes to the most divisive social event of our lifetimes, they both had fuck all to say about it.
Yeah, well,
it's like,
what
how
in
can you
reference
be
to Israel?
Vaccine.
Ah.
Remember that? I mean, it seems so long ago now, and everyone's thought it's long COVID. It's like,
Oh, yeah. I laughed at what you sent me that message that someone said in the surf.
yeah.
I got myocarditis from
yeah,
COVID.
I couldn't believe it, man. I started laughing, and these boys like, "What are you laughing at?" And I was just like, "Long COVID, bro."
The thing about that is we're very shortly potentially seeing this pandemic treaty. Have you seen what's going on with that? That's pretty scary. Do you know many of the details of that? I got a bit of an idea of.
Yeah, look, mate, to be honest, the last 2 weeks I've completely checked out of the news media, and it's been nice to not be having your finger on the pulse of the world.
I said that, and I said that to you just prior to thing. I did the same thing. Like stepped away just probably the last 2 to 3 months of the pod last year because we were on it. And I also, and in anticipation of the fact that 2024 is an election year, there's going to be a lot going on. You're going to be surrounded with fucking a lot of information, and I just needed a break. And fuck, it was, I don't know, peaceful. It just felt good because, you feel burdened. You feel weighed down by all this stuff that you're seeing. And almost you feel like, because you feel like you can't make a difference. So you feel, I don't know.
Helplessness is a big thing.
Helplessness. And, and that wasn't great. So I was like, I like bringing attention to some of these things. But burdening yourself with the knowledge, it becomes a lot. So
well, it's kind of a vicious loop, right? Because, I mean, it's depressing to be paying attention. But then if you want to not be depressed, well, then the solution is to not pay attention. But that feeds the cycle, right? Because not paying attention is that all of a sudden we've signed away our sovereignty to the WHO. And
I've seen this. So I've got I wrote down a couple of little stats on it because I was interested in it as into what was going to be enforced by this treaty. And firstly, that I wanted to make note of is this is decided upon by people who are unelected bodies representing the entire planet. So these people we've not said, we want you to make a decision on our behalf. They've just gone, we're going to put this treaty forward, and then from what I can tell, everyone has to sign on for it to come into action. But it's pretty scary. Some of the things like enforcing surveillance and censorship. This is in the this is in the event of them declaring there's some sort of
global health event.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, firstly, I'd like to say, well, fuck, what's them to say that climate change is in a
global health event?
In them start, but basically they'll enforce surveillance and censorship. They can get rid of freedom of speech, which is censorship. They can require governments to censor and push a central narrative, which is, it comes down to censorship.
Well, it's about the harmonisation of messaging, right?
Exactly.
Making sure everyone's singing from the same song sheet and there's no deviation from a narrative.
Which we found through COVID. We found the minority of voices seem to, in the end, have a louder voice because they were able to actually get some of the information out there that was
it went from follow the science to follow the silence.
Eventually some people, I think, just clued on to I wanted to believe you, I trusted you, and now I can plainly see that you're fucking you're just now you're doing mental gymnastics to justify what has been done. They can enforce mandates, and no longer will they be recommendations; they'll be enforced. This is by the World Health Organization. They can enforce digital passports, and it's ongoing. Those are just a few things that they can do in the event of what they would consider a global health crisis.
Yes, the darkness is that dark in the future, isn't it, Branchy?
It's scary considering how much we now know was wrong, and if the decisions that were made, albeit let's say they were acting out of fear themselves, going, well, we actually truly believe that this is the only way out. I don't believe they did. I think they saw money and they tried to justify their actions in however way they possibly can. But at the end of the day, if we can see now that what was done to try and combat COVID then was wrong and actually seems to have resulted in some pretty damaging...
But it wasn't the combating, it was the enforcement of the vaccine. And you know what's pisses me off is all these people going, I was like, well, nobody forced you to take it. But it's like, if I had a girl around, so it's like, well, look, you can't leave, you can't work until I've given you a couple of shots. Nobody forced ya.
Nah.
It's bullshit.
Yeah. And it's...
Coercion is not consent.
And people keep saying, just move on. And I, to a point, want to move on. But it's like, my mum nearly died because of this. If she had died, and there's people who have had family members died, and latest data is suggesting potentially up to 17 million people worldwide have died because of...
That's
maybe not
World
a direct
War I numbers.
Yeah, and this isn't this. This was these aren't as I think it was Brett Weinstein said on
good Weinstein.
Said on Tucker. He said, those numbers aren't hard to imagine when this is on a scale of billions of people getting this very unknown and dangerous, potentially dangerous drug. So to suggest that potentially 17 million people could have died, not maybe as a direct result, but that's the same as with COVID. They're like, well, that's not a direct result, but they may not have died had they not got it. Same with the jab. So
I had a judge say to me at an event, he came to my show, he's like, look, you got so much great material, but it's time to leave the vaccine and COVID stuff behind. Yeah. But the way I feel about it is like, when you've known someone for years and then they get on the piss and they show you a side of themselves and they behave really poorly and then they wake up the next day and, oh, geez, what happened? It's like, we need to talk about the way you behaved, because I don't want you in my house again unless we have a reckoning about how you behaved and what was said and what was done.
Yeah, that's true, because, I mean, in this case, it was obviously fear, not alcohol, but the fear brought out
Well, arguably, I think the fear was worse than alcohol.
Yeah. It's amazing what you do when you're in a fear response, flight or fight.
At least people can drink themselves to sleep. You know what I mean? Like people aren't, fearful and then, going to sleep.
Well, and this is why we're seeing. So I've got a couple of articles actually. I wasn't going to bring these out till later.
You're fucking doing your own research.
I've got a couple of articles that have come out on the. Let's talk about the excess deaths for now, because that's pretty damning and concerning. Because now people again will say, like, why are you talking about it still? Well, now the data's coming out, so we can talk about it with confidence and confidence that you can't argue against. Not you, but the people who would argue against that. So is it Ed Dowd that you spoke with?
Yeah.
So he obviously, I got to see him on stage. You were on stage as well. You did very well, and then obviously was it Malhotra? Malhotra. It was John Shipton.
Yeah, Julian Assange's old man, and Naomi Wolf.
Yeah, so it was very great. It's an incredible occasion, and I think a lot of listeners who were in Perth at the time or anywhere in the other cities would have gone to that event. But hearing them talk was incredible. But Ed Dowd stuff was mind-blowing, using
insurance company data.
Yeah, life insurance. And now it seems to be a pretty common way of measuring what's going on.
Across all the countries where it was rolled out, they're seeing the same sort of data come up.
Yeah, so I
correlation isn't causation, though.
Yes, well, correlation doesn't equal causation. I do agree. But the fact that the all-cause mortality spikes are directly after the COVID jab campaign and booster campaigns.
Yeah, look, see, I'm at a point with it socially, though. Like, I don't even want to talk about it socially because so many people I love and care about, it's fucking in the back of their heads. And I don't want to make them feel bad because so many people were blackmailed into it and they had no real choice. Some people did have a choice and there was a price they weren't prepared to pay, but... I got friends that have got kids and mortgages, and they had to make a choice between doing that or letting their kids go hungry and not being able to pay their mortgage. And that's what I'm still the most angry about is the extortion element that was placed on people by the state premiers and by the corporate sector, by the way. Yeah. Don't forget that it was the corporate sector that came in and said, hey, you need to have the jab to come to work. So... Yeah,
and that sort of stuff, it's concerning to see how, so like I won't talk about this in normal life anymore. This is, like you just said, this is not part of the conversation. I just sort of I use this platform to get out information that we're now finding and sort of vent my frustrations as well. But that's the only time I ever speak about it. You might get someone come up to me and go, oh, what about this? And I'm like, well, yeah, and I sort of try and swerve the conversation as early as possible because, again, I'm over it as well. But I use this platform here to get this sort of information out, not because I think that what we're saying now is going to make a difference in regards to people being held accountable for their actions. But I think, hopefully, if there's enough people like us in our podcast, and we're a small fry in the grand scheme of things, getting this sort of information out there, hopefully the next time something like this happens,
people will think twice.
Potentially. And that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping. That's why I continue to go, right, this is where I'm just going to show you that these people weren't fucking crazy. They weren't conspiracy theorists. They had a right to actually show concern. And we can see that now with the data.
I don't know how it is for you socially, but this is why I was going to call my show The Corey Hole, right? Because I'd be at parties and stuff and people would come up and, have a quiet word and be like, hey, this happened to my friend, or this happened to me, and I can't say this in front of anyone else, but I just wanted you to know. But yeah, it's
if only people knew how many people felt the same. But it's this.
Well, that's what totalitarianism does, right? It tries to make you feel like you're the only one who feels this way. It's about isolating you.
That's interesting, because I want to talk to you about populism and social, because I don't quite understand some of the differences in some of them. So maybe we can actually talk about that later, and totalitarianism. But I'll quickly read some of this article that I found quite interesting. Life insurance actuaries. Life insurance actuaries are finding that more people are continuing to die at alarming rates, even more than before the pandemic, that cannot be accounted for by COVID. For instance, the Society of Actuaries Research Institute found that there was a 34% increase in deaths among working-aged people 35 to 44 in the last quarter of 2022. So 34% increase. That is not a small amount. And so they're trying to attribute some of these things to long COVID, which...
I think it was Putin, though, really.
What do you mean?
Putin, Trump. I mean, they'll fucking blame anything but the elephant in the room, right?
100%. But yeah, however, CDC and public health agencies are at a loss to explain these statistics, nor is there an apparent urgency on their part to get to the bottom of this. So I wonder why there's no urgency to get to the bottom of this.
Why would we want to make ourselves look bad and embarrass ourselves?
Yeah. And we've said this plenty of times. If they had have said, look, this is the option we think is best, there's a big risk, you don't have to take it, but this is what we've got on the table at the moment. It's been rushed. We've tested the boosters on 8 mice. But
I mean, everything that's come out, about the leakage of the vaccines, the mitochondrial effects, and it's I still can't believe that it happens some days.
Yeah, 100%. It is interesting. But the fact that we're looking at data from life insurance policies and them being claimed and paying out.
Well, they're all statistics, bro. And you know what they say about statistics?
What's that?
They're like bikinis. They look good, but what they're concealing is the most revealing.
I like that. There's a clip. And on that, so in that whole process, this is another article I did want to talk about, regardless of where this conversation is going. It's actually led pretty well to this. So the state of emergency. There's a case in Victoria that has been trying to push for the release of the health advice that led to the calling of a state of emergency so they can enforce these sorts of rules. And I'll read some of this article because it's pretty interesting, and you might be able to come at it from a law point of view and understanding. So we'll go for earlier in May. Concerns were raised about legitimacy of the state of emergency. The contention was that the government established it on presumptions rather than concrete evidence. To challenge this, affidavits from key officials, including former Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton and ex-Health Minister Jenny Mikakos, can't remember the pronunciation of her name, were deemed crucial. So during a court appearance on December 15th, Nick's legal team pressed for the release of these affidavits. The judge set the deadline for January 15th for the prosecution to provide the necessary material. So it's pretty unprecedented that they would release this. And as the deadline looms, the question is, will they actually release it, or will they do what they
There'll be
do?
some reason that's not released. I mean, or there'll be some distraction to keep everyone, thinking about something else.
And this is what I said last week, is, the lockdowns, the border shutdown, that was all based on the idea and the principle that you couldn't pass on COVID if you had the jab. Same with passports. Now, having known that this wasn't a factor at all, you can see that these things that we put in place were all far overreacting. And I think that either we have to have a conversation, and I still think this, we have to have a conversation with Pfizer, who would have provided the information or the safety data or the health data for these people to make the decisions, and say, well, you said it wasn't going to stop the spread, so we need to have a conversation with you why you told them that. Or you told them, no, we don't know. And then McGowan and the likes went, no, we're still going to shut it down. In which case we still have to have a conversation with them and go, why the fuck did you shut it down giving the information that you knew it wasn't going to stop the spread? So that's not going to happen because he stepped down. And I don't know what the legal requirements, you might be able to address the legal requirements.
I don't know, mate. That's above my pay grade. But I think it's fascinating that Anastasia Pala Shameless, can't pronounce her surname, the Queensland Premier, she's the last of the pandemic era premiers to have quit suddenly. And I mean, they haven't gone full term. I think it's telling that none of them have, Dan Andrews, Mark McGowan, Anastasia Palaszczuk, Michael Gunner.
Well, they're claiming long COVID.
Oh, wow. And they've all walked into fucking cruisy jobs with BHP.
Isn't that
Rio
interesting?
And APM and...
Who could have predicted that? Corey?
No.
It's not like you did say it 4 or 5 times on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I think I'm the most fucking vindicated comedian in this country.
We have to go and find some of these clips of you saying that you guarantee that he's going to go work for someone like that.
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, though, you didn't need to be a fucking genius to be able to see that that was going to be the revolving door from public to private, and then it was a cushy jobs for the boys arrangement taking place.
But it happens in every sector. You see the people who were, on the board of the World Health Organization would then quit and then move to the board of Pfizer. Or
what's the conflict of interest anymore?
I know. It's pretty interesting, but yeah. So that sort of stuff. Like I always want to move on, but I still want to. When information like this comes out, and I'll be, what's the date? It's January 9th. So 6 days. I'll be looking very closely to see if that information comes out because Peter Collier, a close friend of mine who's in Parliament, Honourable Peter Collier, I think he meant to call him. He used to be the Education Minister, and he made calls. I think early last year, or even potentially late 2022, of just suggesting to Mark McGowan's administration, we're not conspiracy theorists. We just want to see the health advice that you have been given to use as a vindication of these shutdown measures. That's all we want. We just want to see it, and they still wouldn't release it. So
I happened to cross paths with a Labor MP in the gym.
Okay.
Last year, the dishonourable John Carey. And I saw him and I was just like, excuse me, mate, aren't you that bloke? And he kind of was a bit excited, recognised it. Yeah, you're that bloke who works for Kerry Stokes in Twiggy Forest. And he's just like, walked away. I was like, Kerry, come back here, mate. Tell me, have you had your 5th booster? Don't walk away from me. Anyway, so he's going over to the free weights, so I followed him. He was sitting there doing his bicep curls, and I sat down next to him and waited for him to put his weights down. I said, geez, you can lift a lot of weight for a bloke without a spine, Carey. I was like, tell me, have you had your 5th booster? He's like, look, I don't know who you are, but you don't win an argument by insulting people. I was like, oh, you mistook this for an argument, mate. No, I am insulting you, you dickhead. And he ran off, right? And then I saw him in the gym the next day. Yeah. And I was just like, hey, Kerry. I was like, mate, who needs cash for access with a Labor MP when I can come and chirp you in the gym for free, you pissant?
Fuck, man. It's pretty crazy to see how that, like, the nation has reacted, because now it's a 5% uptake of boosters, which is, does that make 95% of Australia are
anti-vaxxers? Welcome to the club, bitches.
Like, what are their excuses for not having it now? It looks like we don't need it. Yeah, probably never did. Well, fucking yeah. That's
how about an apology? And this is my view, right? Unless you're willing to acknowledge that you were conned and that you fell for the propaganda, you don't get to have an opinion about anything on politics, a credible opinion, right? Like, no. Until you own up and admit, like, shut the fuck up. And people say, oh, Corey, it was a long time ago, all right? Let it go. I was like, well, shut the fuck up about Australia Day. Yeah. It was a long time ago. Yeah. Forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of those things where I keep saying I want to let it go, but every time something like this comes up, you need to remind people of how they acted. And I don't know. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe you just need to.
Well, what's that Milan Kundera quote? The Czech writer is like, the struggle of man against power is one of memory against forgetting.
That's nice. Our quotes have been going well. I might clip that up for you and put that on, mate.
You're welcome.
The people I feel sorry for the most especially considering their lack of risk in this at all, is the kids who didn't have a say in whether they'd have the vaccine. We can see very concerning data already within 2 to 3 years of this. Who knows what's going to happen long term? These kids who were going to benefit nothing from having the jab, and still there's no data suggesting that they needed it. Still there's no data suggesting it was safe for them.
I had a mate call me up and break down in tears over that, and he said, I feel like a failure as a father because I let my kids have that fucking vaccine.
I'm very glad we stood strong, and for all of mine and my ex-wife's differences, we were both very staunch on the fact that Scotty was not getting the fucking the COVID vaccination. She did not need it. It was not required. I did not need it. It was not required. Anyone who needed it, maybe go get it. Like if that's what you need to do, if that's what you want to do, but take it at the risk of the fact that you might have some issues. And it looks like, as I said, if this data ends up being,
look, mate,
taken further,
I got more confidence buying drugs off a bloke I don't know than a vaccine from Pfizer. Not that I buy drugs.
That's what one of my mates said. He was at a barbecue and he was the only one of his family members who was unvaccinated, and they're like, "Why don't you just get it? Just fucking get it." And he had this staunch principle of like, I don't trust what's in it. And I wasn't one of those people because I don't know what the fuck's in anything. Like I know what's in my fruit, but I don't know what's in anything I have. And then they were like, "Oh, you were on the coke last week. You don't know what's in that." And he's like, "Yeah, but I trust the bikies more than I do the fucking government."
Right.
So it's just...
but at least they're responsive to shit product,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
because they want to keep selling it to you. They've got a vested interest in making sure they've got a good product. Whereas Pfizer, it was just like, well, fucking the taxpayers guaranteed the bill. Who cares about them? We'll swindle them once and fucking...
Yeah.
Have you seen the Pfizer share price?
No.
Oh, it's plummeted.
It's gone.
Plummeted. And they just acquired another pharmaceutical company that specialises in cancer treatments.
Yeah, well... Fuck.
Seagen Pharmaceuticals, I believe, a $43 billion acquisition.
Did I see... Yeah, so fuck, that's... So did I see that they were not only invested, obviously, in the jab, but they were also... They bought...
heart medicines.
Things that...
They've really cornered the market.
For myocarditis and pericarditis. So they were supplying something that caused it and fixed.
Look, credit where credit's due, right? I mean,
it's a solid business plan.
I mean, fuck.
Fuck, if you're going to have a... Yeah.
The darkness is that dark.
But anyway, that stuff, I don't think we've seen the end of that because we've got the Texas lawsuit against Pfizer. Have you seen that's going on?
Yeah, the Attorney General over there.
Which I think their main argument is the description of it being 95% effective and using that.
Safe.
Yeah. So that's they're pretty... I think that if they win this, that sets a pretty interesting precedent, and what will happen going forward for that. But
I tell you what, though, it's been nice. Like doing stand up, I haven't done much vaccine content at all. I think the last 3 gigs I didn't even tell one of those jokes.
It's nice to move away from it. And again, like I said, I've not spoken about it. I don't reckon for like really out of the podcast. I don't think I've spoken about it for the last year or so. I don't see a need to. I look at some of the things and go, yeah, I can see what's happening there. But I'm just using this platform to potentially educate people who maybe fell for it. Because if they can understand that either one, they made a mistake, or two, that they acted poorly in response to other people's decisions to not get vaccinated, then that's a win.
I think the third aspect of it, though, is that trust is broken, right? And mainstream, like, who trusts anything they say in the news anymore? And information is the currency of democracy, and what we have is a currency crisis. I said that numerous times on this pod, and the legacy of that whole era is a breakdown in trust in all our institutions, and I don't know how it's going to recover.
The legacy media is at, I think recent stats showed it's at the lowest form of trust it's had in history, which it's not surprising considering how heavily they lent into to the vaccine safety stuff as well.
I'm still waiting for a vaccine for the Y2K bug, bro.
Yeah, but it's very easy to see that the mainstream media in general, they're just political extensions of whichever faction they decide to
It's a
align
fourth branch
with.
of government, bro.
It is, yeah. So if they're like the vast majority of the mainstream media aligns to the left, and they'll voice that propaganda, but there'll also be a small faction that also aligns to the right. There's these independent journalists and independent podcasts that aren't liable to a sponsor's thoughts. Like we've been pretty frank with anyone who wants to come on as a sponsorship, like All Trades or anyone like that. Like, you don't get to dictate what we talk about, who we get on, what we say. That's just something we're pretty firm on. First thing, every time someone messages us, I send it to Delby. Delby like, are they going to stop us from talking about what we want? That's our number one thing.
But that's a currency in of itself, right?
Yeah.
Is that you're not going to be influenced by advertisers.
Well, it's pretty easy to see that, CNN or one of these bigger, well, they're not that big actually, really thinking about it.
Joe
But
Rogan's got more listeners than Sam.
yeah, I love that one where he's just obliterated them and said, like, they thought they were as big as me and I'm 10 times bigger than them. But these sorts of places, they throw to an ad break and it's like this news
Pfizer
is brought to you by Pfizer. Like, why would they ever talk negatively against Pfizer? But that's one example. But that's also the narrative in wars and the narrative in whatever they want to push. It's always aligned to the faction of government that's pushing their narrative.
It's funny. I can't remember where I read it. Maybe Matt Tate, but Clinton administration, the second Clinton administration, one of the first things they did was remove the prohibition on pharmaceutical advertising on television.
Really?
Yeah, it was one of the first orders of business in his second administration. Let's digress slightly.
Yeah, fuck.
Old Billy Clinton apparently likes him young. Who would have thunk that the president Billy liked to fuck around on his wife? But look, let's say, like, I heard that's like, what was it, from Epstein's deposition, that Clinton likes him young.
Yeah.
And that's not a condemning statement in of itself, right? You talk to any 40-year-old bloke, he's like, yeah, of course I like him younger than me, right? But
So there's a couple of things I take from this initial leak. I don't know if there's going to be any more. I'm sure there'll be more information come out about all this. But all the names that were released, everyone knew this anyway. Like, they were all released on the dark web. The whole list was done. We already knew it. So their names are no more tarnished than they were before. Everyone thought it anyway. So it's, for me, I'm sort of thinking, what was one, and I haven't seen it yet, but what was happening in the background? What sort of legislation was being passed? What sort of moves were being played? I don't know. I'm going to have a bit of a look. But when something like that is leaked and pushed so heavily by the mainstream media as a headline story,
what are they distracting us from?
What are they distracting us from? So that's one thing. Second thing I'd take from the Epstein list leak is although it's very concerning about the sex trafficking and the underage sex, I'm not undershadowing that. The thing that I don't think is being talked about enough is the leverage and the leverage that they're getting from taping these people having sex and what sort of influence that's peddling around. So these people don't just go there to have sex with underage kids. They go there to party. They have sex with people that they don't believe in the start are underage. They get trapped by having sex with a 16, 17-year-old that potentially looks 18, 19. They get taped and then they get used as leverage to...
Sexual blackmail. That's how the world works at that level of power, right?
Exactly. So my big concern in that factor is what influence has been peddled, what policy changes have been made, and to benefit who. Like, who is Epstein working for? Like, who is he peddling?
Everyone knows who he's working for. He's working for Mossad.
So this is the thing. So I don't know too much about that, and maybe you can go deeper on that because I'm interested in hearing that. But if Epstein was working for Mossad, is there connections with the CIA, an asset? I've read people thinking that potentially he was a CIA asset, but you go down your Mossad stuff.
Well, look, this is a very broad topic and it's hard to give a quick summary of, but basically, you've heard of the Five Eyes intelligence arrangement?
Yeah.
There's 6. Israel is the 6th. And there was an agreement struck after the Second World War. between the CIA and Mossad, because the CIA needed intel about the Soviet Union, right? And the Israelis were the kings of international espionage, because espionage required thinking and speaking and sounding like people of a certain country to go behind enemy lines and gather information. The Americans couldn't do that. By virtue of the demographics of Israel, because a lot of them were refugees from Eastern Europe, they had that ability. And there was an agreement. There's a great book about this called The Ghost by Jefferson Morley. And James Angleton, who was the chief of counterintelligence at the CIA, there was a deal done whereby the Israelis gave the Americans human intelligence in exchange for signals intelligence. So your satellite gathering and you know, information tapping, all that sort of stuff. So there's been an arrangement at that level for almost 70 years between those two agencies. And, you know, people go, well, that's anti-Semitic and conspiratorial. It's not. It's fact. Yeah. Right? And, you know, you can call it anti-Semitic if you like. It doesn't change the fact that it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
Ghislaine Maxwell's father was involved in all that sort of stuff too.
Yeah.
And he suspiciously fell off a boat and drowned.
I won't comment on it too much because I don't know overly a lot about it, but it does seem that there has to have been some sort of agenda and some sort of governing body that Epstein was working for. And he wasn't supplying intel for his own personal gain. He was already rich enough. He didn't need that. Whose power and influence peddling was he trying to benefit? I'm very interested to see where that leads, because I don't think that's been asked enough. This underage sex trafficking stuff is disgusting. And obviously, I think it leads to other even worse scenarios that potentially maybe it's that sort of rabbit hole. You start looking into that, and
what I want to know is though, like, what utility was there in having sexual blackmail on Stephen Hawking? He participated in an orgy. Well, what's he gonna do?
It is interesting because
Naomi Campbell was on there, Charlize Theron, John Cusack. I mean,
yeah, but like, what are they? Like, if you went down the tinfoil hat, like a couple of people you've just mentioned, very influential, like Charlize Theron, she's raising a non-binary child, you know. Naomi Campbell in the world of fashion and money, I guess, in that regard.
You know, look, and as much as I hate to concede this, like, I mean, I've seen the line trotted out by the legacy press that just because you were on the plane or you went to the island doesn't mean you did anything untoward. I mean, it's like being represented by token management in this country. I mean, it doesn't mean you raped someone and that your agency paid some hush money to keep the victims quiet with a non-disclosure agreement. It looks bad. It's bad optics. And I think there were some people who were there just probably as, you know, a bit of extra baggage, you know, to make it look like it was all legit and just a big party when the specific targets were already identified.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, potentially. And then also, I guess, another avenue is, you know, some of these people were flown there to leverage and didn't fall for the trap and went, no, fuck no.
I'm just impressed they had disabled access on Epstein's Island. They built a ramp for that fucking temple of depravity. Would have been good fun though, being Jeffrey. I mean, what a power couple Jeffrey and Ghislaine were. It's just like, imagine that. It's like you're flying around the world, you're compromising world leaders, having a jolly old time.
His sort of like uprising is very mysterious. It sort of comes from nowhere, which does suggest to me that like a CIA Mossad sort of asset where they're using him to get intel. Like, you can understand what sort of leverage at the end of the day could Prince Andrew possibly actually push, but then potentially all it is access to intelligence. Maybe that's as simple as it is.
Well, Andrew, we've got this footage of you fucking a 16-year-old girl, bro. You're going to have to lean on your mum.
Yeah.
We need something done.
Yeah.
Oh, mummy, I've got this bad news to tell you. There's a video of me going down on a 16-year-old girl, and we need the royal family to go and do a statement and a public presentation on behalf of some friends. Would you be all right with that?
100%. And this is the thing, like, and again, it goes back to what I'm most concerned about is not most concerned, because obviously the sex abuse and the sex stuff is pretty concerning. But the fact that, like, what has been influenced because of this, there are some pretty powerful people. Bill Clinton, like, he was president of the fucking United States.
Well, I tell you what, bro. Last year, I got an offer to fly to Roto for levers, and I turned it down. I knew what was going on. I was like, mate, I will not be going down to Pinky's Beach. I know how many GoPros are in those tunes.
And it's the same like with the current president, obviously not with the island and sex trafficking, but he is clearly compromised and being leveraged. So again, you have to ask yourself if someone's being clearly compromised, clearly leveraged to make policy changes as the president of the United States. At the time, he was the vice president, but he's still president now. He's still under the what would you call it? Under the
thumb
direction, of whoever's.
Oh, look, the truth is, bro,
leveraging him.
we'll never know, really. I mean, what was done in exchange for not disclosing certain information and what threats or representations were made, we'll never know. We're just fucking two cis heteronormative white guys talking on a pod.
Well, yeah, exactly, and we know that. And I think we can say clearly that he was leveraged to get the prosecutor fired in the Ukraine, who was looking into the energy company that his son was working for, and doing some pretty shady shit. And
What
if
was the name of that company? Started with B or something, didn't it?
Burisma.
Burisma.
Burisma. So Burisma and
Rhymes with charisma.
and those sorts of things, and then installing their own sort of prosecutor. Ukraine in itself is a fucking interesting topic, and I don't know where it's at the moment. I've not really kept abreast of it. I don't know if you have what's going on with that. But prior to this war, it was just very openly understood that it's the most corrupt country on the planet.
Well, the International Consortium of Journalists did a story, I think it was 2014, about the number of politicians with the most offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands. Ukraine was the top of the list.
Yeah.
Had double the amount of Russia. I mean, it's, been a money pit and, giant money laundering exercise and a feeding frenzy for defence contractors who've poured untold billions of dollars into Ukraine with weapons and for what? I mean, they can't win.
Yeah, it's for democracy. For democracy, for a fucking country that was basically run under dictatorship and still is.
Well, and
he cancelled the elections, didn't he?
Yeah, and I had a big number of neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, a whole Azov battalion. And you see the federal government this week's just passed legislation to make it illegal to do the Nazi salute.
Really? Mm-hmm. What, in public? Like for example, in Australia?
I mean, you can be there, but don't be at 11 o'clock, bro.
Well, Squirrely's fucked then. Because have you ever watched him perform?
No.
He's constantly like, oh, fuck it. That's how he does that.
Yeah, well,
he gets his hand like that. I'm a fucking... he does it constantly.
I've got a new bit for my show that does it at the end, and it's just a bit. It's just a joke, right?
Yeah.
But I don't even think there's an exemption for creative purposes in that legislation because the Book of Mormon, right, has a part where Hitler comes to the stage and there's a number of salutes that take place. Are we going to charge the actors in the Book of Mormon with breaching the federal legislation for doing the salute?
Wow. I mean,
The fucking Book of Moron, the federal government should be called, but...
Yeah.
No, it's bizarre times, bro. And I don't think you can outlaw people doing things like that because it just encourages miscreants and reprobates like me who's just like, fuck, this would be fun.
Yeah. 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 It's, I think when you see this sort of... almost communist-like sort of ruling. I won't go that far, but bordering on setting these rules where there is no freedom for mistakes. There's no freedom at all. You start to see what we're seeing, and maybe we can talk about this a bit more. The protests that we're seeing around Germany, France, like Netherlands specifically, and it's working. But I think there's a total media blackout on these protests. Yeah. And they're fucking immense.
The Australian press has been completely silent on it.
Why?
And it's like, I saw footage of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin and like thousands of tractors.
Yeah.
I mean, 70 years ago, there would have been tanks, but
Yeah.
they're just
Yeah.
tractors, right?
Yeah.
In France, the farmers are spraying shit all over government buildings. And it's all about, having their subsidies cut.
And there goes a bit of that sort of money that, I mean, it's not, Germany's probably supplying a fair bit of money as well. And their dependence on Russia for oil is probably not helping the situation. But
the Nord Stream's been cut off. Boys. No gas. Who did that, by the way?
Oh, yeah. The legacy media would tell you it was Russia did it themselves.
Yeah.
But
Putin was free diving.
yeah, but this is what happens when people are put into desperate times. They'll rebel and they can see it. But the subsidies, for example, being taken away, that money that they've directed to the Ukraine, needlessly laundered, let's be honest, a lot of it, could have been directed to helping the subsidies, like for America, for example. Like these are the farmers that could be getting help to create locally sourced food that's healthy and not fucking imported. It's not processed food. Where processed food is, I think I read a damning stat on that the other day, and I'm not going to get it wrong, but it was one of the top causes of death on the planet. Processed food, because of the health implications. Like it seems we should be putting more money into the subsidies to help these farmers grow locally sourced fruit and vegetables, and less worried about some other fucking corrupt country's conflict. Maybe just don't put them in fucking NATO like they were asked to begin with.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, I mean, historians go and exhume that whole sordid story. I think they'll be scathing on not just the Americans, but the American satellite states of Germany, Australia. I mean, how much money did we pour in? Western Australia poured money in as a state economy. Yeah. Not as a federal economy, as a state economy. What businesses does Western Australia have donating to the foreign aid of Ukraine? But you know what? No one was happier about the Ukraine war than Australian farmers. Yeah. All that wheat that got taken off the market in Ukraine, and Australian farmers had bumper seasons, good grain prices, and good on them. Hard work being a farmer.
Yeah, a couple of...
I tell you what, you wouldn't know there's a fucking cost of living crisis on down south though, mate.
Yeah.
As you go down to those brand new 200 series Land Cruisers, the wineries and the breweries are filled to the fucking brim.
Yeah, actually, a couple of my mates are farmers, and they've had pretty good couple of years, actually. Good crops as well. Yeah. But yeah, honestly, I think there's an attack on our food, and that has been for the last 20 or 30 years. You see the likes of Bill Gates, who wants to just buy up all the land, and then, I don't understand when you look at someone like him, and I'm going to body shame him, someone like him lecturing us on health.
Doesn't look healthy, does he? He looks very sickly.
Have you seen the pictures of him with, he's fat. He looks pregnant. He's got a big fucking gut. And how is someone like that, how dare someone like that lecture someone, I'm not saying I'm an epitome of health, but
you're in pretty good
I'm
nick.
in pretty good nick. How dare someone like that lecture me on my health? And this is the thing, the irony that I seen the other day in wanting us to have a freedom of autonomy to choose what we do with our body in regards to, the trans movement and that sort of stuff, but not have a freedom of autonomy to choose what we eat and what sort of vaccinations and medications we put in our body. That's the biggest, that's the funniest, that's probably the most comical part of the last 2 to 3 years, to see both of those narratives play out at the exact same time.
We live in the era of peak irony, don't we? And it's one of the hallmarks of good minds is an appreciation for irony.
I think, I think it was Weinstein yesterday or a couple of days ago on Tucker, when he just said we are living in a world that does not make sense and nothing is being done about it.
No.
And we're seeing it play out in front of us.
On a macro level and a micro level too. I mean, on a micro level, I did this joke at... I didn't do it at that Hard Yarns gig, but there's a comedian I don't like.
Oh, yeah?
Who's a bulimic and got a TV show on a network called Binge.
Oh, fuck.
Just look at a book. Just get vaccinated. Guy, it's the most interesting thing about me.
Oh, fuck, that's funny. Thanks again, actually, for coming on the Hard Yarns Christmas special. It was good fun, man.
Mate, fucking, have I got a story about that night?
Yeah.
So afterwards, you know, had a few beers. I ran into a few of the boys I used to play footy with down at Bassendean and had a skinful. And I was like, all right,
We all did.
time to go, Corey. And walking down the street, couldn't get an Uber. Sat down, exasperated. And this woman winds down her window in the car. She said, "Excuse me, are you a Christian?" Like, yeah, I guess.
You look like
She said,
Jesus.
Because you look like Jesus, and I think the Lord is telling me to give you a lift home. Do you need a ride? I was like,
Fuck off.
yeah, I do. She's like, jump in. I was just like, fucking A. And then I got in the car. I was like, fuck, this could be like a Christian Catherine Burney or something.
Oh
you know,
my
look in
God.
the back seat. There's
Yeah,
no one
yeah.
there with a fucking sword. I was like, sweet. She was so lovely. And she drove me home, and now she's messaging me, trying to recruit me to come down to her church.
Of course.
But I had a look at it, and I got a friend on the far right who's religious, and I ran it by him. He was like, they look a little bit Hillsongy, mate. Stay away from anything that looks like Hillsong.
Yeah. This is the thing. So recently, obviously, we've been diving into a bit more esoteric and spiritual, and the universe has come up a lot in our podcasts, and for lack of a better word, God. And as soon as you delve into that area at all, especially in the comment section, you'll get all these people really preaching God, and for me, God is we call it, like me and Delby, we call it the universe. Like that's our thoughts, that's our own personal thoughts. I honestly, personally believe the word God has been hijacked by dogmatic religion to serve men's egos and greed.
Well, you could be God, Branchy, because they say God is a comedian playing to an audience where no one's laughing.
Classic. People laugh when they watch me. Actually, not on New Year's Eve. I bombed.
Did ya?
I bombed hard. It was tough room. Very tough room. The boys eventually wrestled it round, and then the break came in. Delby played a couple of games before they brought me up, and it wasn't a very great setup. And
So blame the MC. That's what I hear.
yeah,
Right?
I'll-
He didn't preheat the oven.
no, he did. He did pretty well. He got it okay. I just potentially too many dick jokes for the night, and it just wore thin. I haven't bombed for a while, so it was a good level up.
It's good to have a bomb now and then. It
Yeah.
fucking keeps you humble. But going back to what you were saying about God and spirituality, I mean, you see it on the dating apps. People say, you know, spiritual but not religious, and, you know, people not conforming to institutional religion. And, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a comedian in the States the other day, and, you know, we both sort of started our careers as, I guess, left-wing atheists.
Yeah.
And now, 10 years down the track more, we're probably closer to right-wing Catholics
Yeah.
than anything. And it's like, when you realise the scale of what you're up against, it's like you need something to believe in, a higher power. It's just like, you know, that St. Peter's going to grant me entrance and go, you know, mate, you know, you did some shit, but by and large, you're a pretty good bloke.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I mean, I had an experience with some psychedelics that, you know, made me 100% confident in a higher power.
100%. It's
100%.
incredible how that does that, doesn't it? It just changes shit. It's not a trip. You're like, oh no, I can see there's something more. I don't know what. I'm not going to pretend to understand what it is, but there's something. It's
And it defies articulation, some of those experiences, you know. It's a deeply mystical and profound experience, and it's not for everyone.
No.
But some people find religion without it. But I don't think I would have considered myself spiritual had I not had that experience and some of the subsequent experiences I've had without psychedelics thereafter.
yeah, exact same. That's I would have started out as this sort of coming into early adult life as a lefty. Like a couple of mates who were in politics at footy clubs would call me a lefty, which is interesting because those roles have swapped. I guess in that
The left
regard.
is now what the old right used to be,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
But they'd call me a lefty fucking hippie, always like a social justice warrior sort of self. But they'd call me a lefty, and I was very clearly an atheist. Did not believe in religion, in God. I thought it was laughable. Now I'm the other way, not necessarily in a dogmatic religion like a Christianity or a certain specific faith. I think they all have their benefits and their the good lessons and teachings. But I think those dogmatic religions have been hijacked by, like I said,
Because I
men's
grew
ego.
up going to, religious schools and it's kind of forced down your throat there. But I mean, the teachings of Jesus, I've got all the time in the world for, mate.
Incredible, aren't they? Yeah.
Be good to your neighbours. It's just basic common decency.
Yeah. I think in finding that sort of stuff, I've started to stumble across things that at a time I thought they were very woo-woo-y, spiritual fucking mumbo-jumbo things to do. For example, journaling. And I don't do journaling for magic or fucking manifestation.
It's
I
for
do
posterity to look back on and see it change in a trajectory and a development.
That's exactly what it's for. And I've found it's been incredibly beneficial for the last month or so that I've been doing it. Regarding, just the production of my day, learning from potential mistakes I made the day prior. How can I better myself in the next couple of days? Where am I going? And of all the people that got me into something like that, and this is going to ruffle some feathers, this was listening to Andrew Tate talk about it and stoicism and being stoic. And I was interested in stoicism already prior to that.
Bit of AstraZeneca, mate.
Yeah. So I quoted Seneca the other day that we often, I can't remember, it was in, we often play things out in our minds. It was one of those sorts of quotes about worrying about something that's not there. And Seneca, I was reading some Seneca quotes and Marcus Aurelius quotes, and all of them were talking about journaling at some point. I was like, fuck, these are some of the greatest minds of in history.
Yeah. Timeless wisdom.
And they're talking about journaling their thoughts every single day to keep themselves on a path. Like, why the fuck wouldn't I be doing that? The greatest minds in history. And yeah, stoicism seems to be one of those things that now that someone like a Tate or a couple of other people like a Jordan Peterson might touch on it, it now has become a far right thing to do. Like, you can't be stoic, can't be fucking, you can't have temperance and
delayed gratification.
This is that's a
Andrew
terrible thing.
Tate's such an interesting character for mine, I mean, because I hate his toxic materialism and that hyper materialism and the obsession with property and acquisition. But like all good propaganda, there's large kernels of truth in what he has to say. And I think that, what's the Nietzsche quote? All truths that remain silent eventually become poisonous.
Yeah.
For so long, men were told that you are the problem in this culture. There is no room for you to help or try and fix things that have been done by your forebears. And then, Clementine Fords of the world dominated the cultural conversation for so long. And then it was repressed and it's sprung out like an erection at a funeral. And you got someone like Andrew Tate who's there shirt off, hyper masculine, talking about, women like their property and,
It's interesting because like that materialism side of him that you just
it's
mentioned,
repugnant.
I don't like it either, and then because I think it becomes it's not like maybe it's authentic because he talks about these Stoic principles and then he's got all that, but then potentially, and I'd be interested, I'd love to have him on Zoom as a chat. Like, it'd be an incredible chat to just get into the mind of what he's actually thinking.
You wouldn't get a word in though. He dominates a conversation. He takes it over. He hijacks it, and he's very aggressive in
that's
that
true.
rhetoric.
But I'd be very interested to know whether that materialism side of him is just as a tactic to get to the youth as an inspiration of what you can get. I'm interested.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past him as a tactic.
He's a very calculated man.
Yeah.
And he's Muslim too, right?
Yes, yeah. So I'm just interested. I'm not saying maybe he's just fucking ego driven as well. Maybe he just loves fucking bitches and fast cars.
Does seem very ego driven as an individual.
Exactly. But I would be interested to know because some of the things he's said of late, because I didn't pay attention to anything of his in the prior to this whole everything going on about him, and I was like, well, let's have a look in it. People hate him that much. Maybe there's something.
But also,
something to it.
When there's that much hatred for someone, I mean, I experienced this on a micro level in this town, right?
Yeah.
Like, when there's that much hatred for you, it means you are pushing the right buttons on some people.
Exactly. Which is, in the end of the day, why I end up looking into some of his stuff. And then I listened to his content, especially the long form content, and went, this guy's pretty good. He's got some very interesting thoughts. Some of it...
Do you bring that up when you're chatting up a bird, though? Andrew Tate, nothing makes a pussy go dry quicker than the name Andrew Tate.
It does.
Poof. It's like saying the name Clementine Ford to kill an erection. You know?
Yeah, but yeah, the uprising of that sort of look, I'm seeing a lot. Most people who listen to his stuff and content, same with Jordan Peterson, who's apparently a fucking horrible influence on our generation of men. I'm seeing nothing but benefits from the people who listen to those. Like now, Jordan's probably delving into some areas that he doesn't need to delve into. Stick to your psychological stuff.
Yeah, right. When he's in the geopolitics game and he's there with Bibi Netanyahu and Ben Shapiro doing Passover, it's like, come on, stay in your lane, bro.
Yeah.
Stick to the psychology. We don't want to hear you talk about fucking the two-state solution or any of that.
And then, like, it's quite ironic we say that because we talk about everything and we don't have a lane, but we're just socially commentating. I guess you could argue that he's socially commentating, but yeah. But regardless, he like something as simple as making your bed. That I still do that from when I've heard him say that.
I've never made my bed.
So, and his idea was that if you can't make your bed, how can you organise the rest of your life? And I don't necessarily believe that to be true, but that's my one little thing. Like, get it done, get that bed made. And that's one thing I took from him. I've taken a lot from Jordan Peterson. I've looked at a lot of Jordan Peterson and gone, I didn't really like that. But I think you should look like that with everyone.
But you don't have to agree with 100% of the things that someone says for them to be a relevant, useful person or have things to say that are relevant. But, the hatred that was unfairly thrown at Jordan Peterson, I thought was pretty horrific. And people go, oh, he's a benzo head. But it's like, mate, you be the focal point for that much hatred around the world when all he was trying to do was make people's lives better, particularly men's. And there's a generation of young men who, like you say, owe their self-improvement because of the messages they heard from him. And he stopped young men killing themselves. And if that's not a fucking good thing, tell me what is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people... And I don't like to sound like this because I don't think all women are like this. I don't like to sound like this misogynist sort of guy, and this might come off that way. But I do see it with a lot of fuck. I need to word this correctly because I don't want to come across this way. But I see they align with it because of a hating on him, specifically because other women do, and they think it's a thing they need to stick.
It's a herd mentality, right?
Yes.
It's like they're deferring their opinions to someone like Clementine Ford, who signalled him out as a toxic influence. And I was guilty of it in my younger days as well. I mean, I wrote Jordan Peterson off, 10 years ago because I deferred my thinking to someone whom I thought was smarter than me. And then when I got around and had a look at it, I was like, well, actually, that person's not smarter than me. I don't have a problem with what he said here. But also I think, women find him particularly threatening because it undermines the cultural power they've assumed in the last 10 years. Yeah. The sanctification of women agenda that's gone on in the last 10 years and portrayal of women as somehow above being flawed individuals is ridiculous because everyone is flawed, whether you're male, female or transgender or non-binary. Yeah. Well, non-binaries have got more flaws than others, but...
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. I think if you align yourself with a side without any no wiggle room, and you're rigid in your ideas, that person's right on every single thing, you're going down a wrong path. I definitely have also aligned myself with people and gone, Jordan Peterson's probably one of those people where I've gone, fuck, you know what? I actually agree, and I'll try and regurgitate information that he said and not with a full understanding of what he's talking about. And then sometimes I'll have a thought, and this is why I think it's very important to be your authentic self and speak your truths and speak at what you actually are feeling at the time, because either one, you're going to be proven to be wrong and then you can learn from that mistake, or you're going to say something that people agree with and actually has a lot of meaning. And so there's sometimes where I've seen a clip on TikTok or YouTube or fucking whatever and gone, I have always felt like that and I've never said that. Why have I not? Now if I say it, I'm just that person repeating what that person said. Yeah. And I think that's why if I was to say something and it's incorrect, maybe you do have to be careful when you've got a platform now. Well, look, but someone can educate you.
There's no shame in admitting that you were wrong. I think it shows a depth of character to be able to admit you're wrong. And this is going back to the COVID thing, right? Most people can't admit that they were wrong. The ego won't allow for it. But I think it shows a depth of character and a control of your mind when you're able to go, you know, what, hey, I was wrong there, own up. Because it helps you maintain your credibility and your authenticity, because no one's right 100% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you, is there anything you remember admitting you were wrong? Do you remember? It's a hard one. It's hard on the top of your head as well.
Oh, look, in personal relationships, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like with an ex-partner, I was wrong about some things.
Yeah.
Admitted I was wrong. Didn't help me. I was
Yeah.
constantly reminded about it. But no, look, certainly in the last 2 years, like particularly with the vaccine stuff, I think I was probably overly harsh on some people and a little bit too savage.
Yeah.
When, you know, you can catch more flies with honey. But also that was a pretty insane time, and, you know, people were saying you should be excluded from society forever, indefinitely. And I guess it was hard to be conciliatory when you were being met with such hostility. And if I had my time again, I probably would have been a little bit more soft. But look, sometimes the sledgehammer is required, and that was one of those times when the sledgehammer was required, and I probably could have used a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer at times.
Oh, and I'll definitely admit that over the last 2 or 3 years, I think I handled myself pretty well, but there were times where I would have been reactive, impulsive, and then regretted how I acted because I was just acting the way I hated. What I was seeing it was a mirror.
You fight fire with fire, right? And if you come to the table with that energy, you'll get met with that sort of energy. And
it's not often, but like if I was going through a hard time at times. So sometimes you just need that one bad thing, like someone to cut you off in traffic or whatever. Like,
it's funny though, like it's the little things that'll set you off. You know, like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like I'll be walking the aisles at the shops, and it's like I can't figure out what I want to buy for dinner, and I'll have a fucking meltdown. You know, because what fucking pasta do I want?
oh mate,
Start crying.
Yeah, I've definitely like there was at one point. I yelled at Scotty, and I don't yell at Scotty very often. I'm pretty conscious at how I discipline Scotty and when I do. And I remember, I can't even remember the situation. I actually, one happened, she knocked off a pot plant, smashed and went everywhere. It was an accident. It wasn't her fault. She wasn't even being silly. It was just a complete accident. And I fucking went off. Oh, Scotty, what the fuck are you doing? Like I'd had a bad day or something like that. And the fear in her face for an accident, and I'd sent her to her room, and then I fucking caught myself and went, "Oh, mate, you've had a bad day, and it's not great. She's knocked off a pot plant, it's smashed, it's gone all over the floor. You got to clean it up." But
it's easy to forget. I mean, I can remember that growing up with my parents. You know, like they were under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And, you know, inadvertently you could do something to set them off. And, you know, I can remember, you know, both my parents coming to me after, you know, a blow up and going, "Look, sorry, I overreacted, whatever, I love you," you know, having a hug and getting over it.
Yeah.
But I think that's also an important skill, right? Is to be able to make amends when you've had those moments and identify it and remedy it quickly, because the longer you let it fester, the harder it becomes.
100%. Oh, I went straight into her bedroom and I apologised for yelling and I said, Daddy was angry and he took it out on you. It's okay. It's just an accident. And then I asked her, "Do you want to come and help me clean it up?" And like we made a bit of fun out of it and a bit of a game out of it. So I try and that's just one example of and that unfortunately it was to my daughter. But like you can react like that.
Next thing you know, DCP is going to be knocking on your door, bro.
But you know, you get the moments with like social media and you get in a riff and you want to bite. And yeah, I definitely over the last 2 or 3 years I've gone, fuck, that was very, I hate this word, toxic. You didn't have to talk like that.
Yeah,
you were baiting that person.
And yeah, look, that's one thing I, you know, do look back on at times and go, toxic. You know, I said some things to some people which in hindsight I probably regret, and maybe I should apologise about. It
always helps. And of all things, psychedelics took me to that place where I had to forgive and apologise.
And
for
I think
my
it's
own
a
roles.
really important thing, right? Is forgiveness. You know, because I talked about that in my show last year. You know, where do we go from here? And rack my brain thinking about this, and it's forgiveness.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean forgetting,
No.
but it's a very powerful thing. And in my own life, I've learned that the hardest person to forgive is not others, but yourself. To forgive yourself is the hardest thing.
Oh, yes. Well,
Corey, I forgive you.
it was interesting because I sent this to Delby. I always send Delby little clips that come up and on my little scroll through, and it was to move on and be successful, you need to forgive these 4 people. And the first one was your parents for your upbringing or any sort of lessons or failings that they had given or they had imparted on you. The second was those around you, for the way you treated them and the way they treated you and the situation it was. The third one was, I can't remember. Shouldn't have even gone down the path. I can't remember. But the final one was yourself. And it is always the hardest one, is to forgive yourself for any mistakes that you've made. And
that was the single greatest benefit I got from psychedelics.
Yeah.
Because I carried an enormous amount of guilt about my mum dying.
Yeah.
And I carried it for years. And I'll never forget the experience. Was on the back lawn and I had this convulsion type thing.
Yeah,
It just ripped through the center of my body, and this giant blue cloud came out of my chest.
Yeah.
And just dissipated into the ether.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling like the universe had forgiven me.
Yeah.
And it was like this enormous weight had been taken off my shoulders. And
it is incredible, that moment of forgiveness for yourself, for those around you, giving them compassion and understanding for potentially why they acted the way they did, and giving yourself compassion for understanding, why you acted the way you did.
And that's why I got time for the Christians, right? Is because they believe in that concept of forgiveness. But then there's the whole argument, is everything forgivable?
Yeah.
That's
That's a tough one, because you look at something like child abuse and you're like, okay, can you move past this? Can you understand what brought them to that point where
But that's the key word, right? Understanding is more important than blame. And I remember when I was practicing law, you get a kitty fiddler or whatever, that person, they're a fucking horrific, repugnant human being.
Yeah.
But the more interesting question to me is what happened to that person to make them who they are now.
Yeah.
That's the more salient question. And that doesn't mean that, you forget what that person has done or it completely mitigates what that person's done. But I think understanding is more important than blame, because if you can understand it, then you can avoid it in the future.
Yes. And as you famously said on our podcast, to understand Putin's actions is not to condone them.
Yeah, right. And that gets conflated all the time. To understand is to not condone. And I got all the time in the world for people who practice forgiveness. I've been the beneficiary of forgiveness in my life, and I should probably forgive some people in my own.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's always quite growing. It's a moment of growth when you can forgive the people around you that have wronged you, specifically if it was a bad one. I've forgiven some of the hardest things that have happened to me. And claimed responsibility for creating conditions that resulted in those sorts of things happening to me as well. So I think that's quite empowering as well, claiming responsibility for creating the conditions that resulted in you being treated that way.
Takes two to tango, the old adage, doesn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, I think forgiveness is something, potentially that's something we should push more when it comes to like the vaccine and the way we were treated, even I see it, this year is going to be a very interesting year to see how I handle myself in these situations. Like people like yourself who are in these sorts of fields who like to comment on what's going on in the world. The Israel-Palestine stuff is it's on a knife's edge. It's hard. You're not allowed to condone what one side's doing
or understand, right? And that's the other classic example, right? I mean, people go, to understand Hamas is to condone, and it's
It's a very messy thing, and I don't like this idea that Israel can do no wrong and everything, their reaction is justified because of what's being done to them. And I don't like the reaction that Hamas has had, but like for me to have this nuanced discussion and say like, yeah, there's a bit more to it.
But see, this
You're
is
not
the
allowed
problem.
to have that.
There's no currency in nuance on the internet.
No.
To walk a middle ground, right? Because what gets currency on the internet is polarization, extreme.
So, and this is where I want to take the podcast this year, is I want to go the middle ground and have nuanced discussion. I want to even if that means going backwards with our popularity, because, you know, you'll get right-leaning sort of people. You'll get that style of, that genre of person leaning towards listening to us.
I get it all the time. It's like people, no, Corey's too left-wing for me, or Corey's too right-wing for me.
Yes.
It's like, well, I'm not either of those things, right? I'm politically homeless. And, like I said, to walk the middle ground of nuance is much more difficult. It's easy to pick a team.
So that's why I think that's where we take the pod this year. It's going to be all about that middle ground, understanding viewpoints from both sides. We've been pretty good in that respect, but we definitely leaned in a certain way. But I'm far more open to having some conversations with people who I heavily disagree with and being turned around.
But see, this is the thing I learned when I went through the Fringe debacle in 2021 being cancelled, is that the people who are afraid to sit down and have a discussion are worried that they are wrong. And the problem is that you can't negotiate in good faith with a bad religion. And so many of these people have a bad religion in effect. And, you want to be able to sit down at the table and have a discussion. And I don't think anything's that bad where you can't sit down and have a chat about it.
The fear that I've got on a broader scale is if you're ever to apologise for something, and I've done that before where I've apologised for certain things, and then it's been thrown in my face instead of like, thank you for your apology.
In relationships, it's the worst.
Well, this wasn't a relationship. This was a friendship. But it was, this was a while ago, but it was like I apologise for something that really, in the grand scheme of things, I probably wasn't to blame, but I took responsibility and accountability because it was going to affect some other stuff long term for everyone else around. So I took accountability, and instead of like, I acted a certain way as well, I shouldn't have done this, I got to, if it was up to me, this would be, I don't want to say too much about it because it would give away what the situation was. But if it was up to me, it wouldn't be blah, blah, blah. And I was like, fucking hell. Okay, cool. I thought I was admirable. I thought I was being gracious and kind, and you've just thrown it in my face. And I had to show face for the next couple of months as well and just be kind
swallow
to these people and swallow their pride for the greater good of a few people.
Peace.
I don't have to see that person anymore. Thankfully, but it was pretty tough.
One thing I encountered with being forgiven in my life was, having it constantly thrown back in your face whenever an argument would start up, and that's not forgiveness. That's fake forgiveness. And
potentially maybe that's all it was. Maybe I was inauthentic. Maybe I was just saying it for the sake of saying it. So.
Look at us self-reflecting,
I know.
like toxic life.
But it's been a good little chat, mate, actually. Let's finish on a few little predictions for this year. I don't know if you've got any. It's going to be a very interesting year with an election year. I always think the election seems to be a good. It's not good, but.
Well, what did I say at the beginning of 2022? I think it was a cycle of inflation and war.
Yes, you got it pretty right.
I heard some scuttlebutt at dinner over the weekend that we can expect blackouts, power shortages in the grids, problems with that nature here. But on a bigger level, I mean, history makes an asshole out of people who make predictions.
Yeah.
Except me in the last 12 months.
I want to... I haven't watched the movie Leave the World Behind, but I've heard some interesting... Because I do like the whole the conspiracy theory side of things that people like the elites will put out what's gonna happen in the world. I love buying into those. They're fun. It's fun conspiracy sometimes for me. But there's been a lot pointing towards cyber attacks and internet power outages. I've been hearing a lot on the winds.
Well, look, it's happened in Lebanon, right? The power, and you know who's been fucking killing it on the black market is people selling electricity. If you've got generators, and if I had the money, I would go out and buy a shitload of generators and be sitting on them for a rainy day.
Yeah. So, any predictions? The election. Do you know much about that? Who you thinking?
Well, I think Colorado and Maine have taken Trump off the ballots.
I think Colorado he got reinstated. I think it got thrown out. Maine's joined in.
If Sportsbet were offering me odds, I would have $50 on some form of civil war in the United States after the election in November. I don't think either side will accept the legitimacy of whoever wins. I
just find it interesting that the last two elections have been both the legitimacy has been publicly and very vocally challenged by both sides. But only one side has been indicted for it.
Yeah, well, the fact that the law has been a political weapon in the Western world now has been out in the open for some time. Digressing slightly, John Pilger died on the 29th of December.
Okay.
One of the greatest of Australian journalists, great friend of Julian Assange and enemy of American imperial interests and absolute weapon of a man. And if you've got time to go and watch his body of work, made a number of great documentaries over the years.
Wow.
Very sad to lose John Pilger at 84, but 84 for an investigative journalist is a very good innings.
Is there much on the horizon for... Yeah, that's...
For Julian?
For Julian, that you know of?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Anthony Albanese said that he was going to get him home, but I think the Americans reminded Anthony Albanese that, hey, boy, this is just a colony. We make the fucking rules here, not you.
It's interesting. I seen Robert Kennedy said the first thing he'd do, the first day he would... he'd
make an executive order.
Yep, with Assange and Edward Snowden, which is an interesting thing. That's a statement, you know. That's a statement. That's not a political. That's not a policy change. That's nothing. That is, I'm showing that there is room for truth. It's an interesting play that's the first thing he would do.
And you know, I think that would be an incredible thing. It would be a Mandela type moment if Julian Assange was free. I mean, I think Mandela spent 26 years in prison. I don't think Julian's quite there, but
no.
It's the greatest injustice of our lifetime, what's happened to Julian Assange, and the fact that the Australian government has abandoned him. The Australian media establishment has abandoned him, and all those media outlets that profited so much and used all that information to sell their own newspapers, and the fact that they're not in the cells with him is a travesty. And if Anthony Albanese had any balls, he would stand up to the Americans and say, no, there'll be no more submarine deals. There'll be no fuck all until Julian Assange comes home. But who knows? Maybe Anthony Albanese's been to Epstein's Island as well, and he's compromised. And there's a sex tape of him shagging a young Rabbitohs fan.
Okay.
And here's my other prediction: Jerry Seinfeld's on the Epstein list.
That's your prediction?
That's my prediction. Jerry Seinfeld.
Any reason behind that? You're just chucking it out there?
Just chucking it out there.
Okay. Well, I'll predict that that's a very specific one.
What's the deal with airplane food, Jeffrey?
I'll predict Trump wins, and it will be big protests, and it will be a big civil right. Or actually, Trump will win, but he won't win.
Yeah, well, or America just takes off her clothes and launches into a full-blown military dictatorship.
So I see that, the last two elections just prior, there's been race has become a big race protests. I'd be interested to see if race protests happen again this coming summer for them. It's both like clockwork. About 2, 3, 4 months before the election, the last 2 ones. So
the other prediction that I've got is I'm running 2 of the hottest fringe shows in Perth and Adelaide. So check out All Stars Comedy for some comedy that's not safe for the Karens and Darrens.
Yes.
Darrens.
I
Charmed and Dangerous is my show. You can get tickets. You can buy them directly through me, and we don't have to give the fringe booking fees. Cool.
Yeah.
Probably breaching the contract when I say that. But hey, remember what photo I've got, bitches?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, sick. I think the final prediction that I'll make is that, and I think I touched on this last week, I think like a Biden or someone quite high up will acknowledge alien life in some way. Not necessarily like, we're in contact or whatever, but acknowledge it in some way. Just a little baby step, little bite-sized chunk. And I think whilst that happens, something very shady will be happening behind. I think you got to use the information that you know is going to come out anyway and use it in whatever way they possibly can. I think you said it before, information is a
currency of democracy.
Yep. So I think information that they know is going to come out, they'll then just use it at the right times.
And, as dark as it all seems, there's a lot of things that are out of our control. But one thing you can control is to check in on your mates and make sure they're all right, because too many of them have left us in recent times. So
I love that, mate. Thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, mate. Take care of yourself.
Bloody good pod, and have a good 2024, mate.
You too. See you, buddy.
Perfect.